Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about Secretary of the Treasury nominee of Joe Biden, Janet Yellen, her recent remarks on cryptocurrency and how that ties into the greater picture right now of what's going on in our country and the world. So Janet Yellen says cryptocurrencies are a, quote, concern in terrorist financing. This is from CoinDesk. The U.S. should examine how it can curtail the use of crypto for illicit financing, the former Fed chair said. Cryptocurrencies are, quote, a particular concern when it comes to terrorist financing, potential Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said Tuesday. Speaking at a Senate Finance Committee hearing on her anticipated nomination after President-elect Joe Biden takes office, Yellen said the U.S. should be aware of emerging tools for terrorist financing. The technologies to accomplish this change over time, and we need to make sure that our methods for dealing with these matters with tech terrorist financing change along with changing technology. Cryptocurrencies are a particular concern, she said in response to a question by Senator Maggie Hansen, Democrat from New Hampshire, who called crypto use in terrorist financing a growing concern. Hassan was asking about last year's National Defense Authorization Act, which includes a provision for examining how terrorists might use financial technologies to raise funds. I think many cryptocurrencies are used, at least in transaction sense, mainly for illicit financing, and I think we really need to examine ways in which we can curtail their use and make sure that anti-money laundering doesn't occur through those channels, Yellen said Tuesday. So I'd like to remark on this that saying many cryptocurrencies are used, I think, mainly for illicit financing, that's just not true. And ultimately the burden of proof would be on her to demonstrate that claim, and she offers no evidence. She just kind of says that. So I'm not sure what we're supposed to do with that. It does mirror the remarks of the European Central Bank director recently, who said something similar, and it was just, again, like, this is used for funny business, I think she said, mostly. And again, like, no reasoning to back that up. It's just kind of this fear mongering about something that they don't have complete control over. And what's really important here to understand is that a big reason that cryptocurrency is taking off right now and there's so much interest is because so many people are so tired of people like this who oversee a corrupt financial system that benefits giant banks at the expense of regular citizens and especially the working class. People are just sick of the game being rigged, and they don't even really need to understand all of the details and the ins and outs. Like, almost nobody does. But you still kind of understand, like, on some deep level, the system is not working for people. It's working for giant corporations and oligarchs who run this stuff. So, I wonder if they realize that that is part of the appeal of these cryptocurrencies, is just people seeing an alternative to these corrupt financial institutions. Or I wonder if they even realize that, and if they don't, maybe there's an opportunity for learning experience here, and maybe there's some amount of introspection that can be had, and a little bit of criticism, self-criticism, and reflection and improvement in the system that can happen, that this is signaling needs to happen in order for people's trust to be returned back into these financial regulators. But that's just generally not how elites work. They don't have that level of self-reflection. They just project everything onto everybody else. So yeah, all the problems are just because they don't have enough control. If only they just had more control, then there would be less problems. And it just, like, over and over again, it just proves out not to be the case. So, yeah, again, I think many cryptocurrencies are used, at least in transaction sense, mainly for illicit financing. And I think we really need to examine ways in which we can curtail their use and make sure that anti-money laundering doesn't occur through those channels. Yeah, I mean, maybe cryptocurrencies are a concern, but we're also going to look at, in a few minutes here, we're going to look at concerns that are being overlooked on a much, much wider scale, including with Yellen herself. And I guess this isn't just to bash Yellen. I mean, I hope she's an improvement over Steve Mnuchin, who was very corrupt Goldman Sachs executive. And the regulations that he tried to implement against cryptocurrency didn't make any sense. And so, again, I mean, I'm hoping we can have an improvement here, but these types of remarks just, it doesn't inspire that much hope, unfortunately. It says federal authorities are currently investigating whether there is a link between a December transaction of 13.5 Bitcoin by now deceased French computer programmer Laurent Bachelet. Sorry, I don't speak French. To right-wing figures and the attempted insurrection at the U.S. Capitol earlier this month. Several of the recipients of the transaction appear to have been at the Capitol on January 6th. So what? Like, they're saying somebody paid them to go to the Capitol and protest? So they're like paid protesters, or what? I mean, 13.5 Bitcoin is a lot of money. And I don't know. I mean, I didn't see anybody show up with like huge weapons or anything like that at the protest. So at the protest of the Capitol. So if they're saying that it's being used to fund terrorist activities, that doesn't make any sense, because 13.5 Bitcoin to put a couple dumbasses in the Capitol, it just doesn't make sense to me. 13.5 Bitcoin, if you wanted to, you could buy an arsenal of weapons and probably some rocket launchers, whatever, bring them over there, and nobody did that. So, I mean, yeah, it doesn't make sense if it yeah. Anyways, as Fed chair, Yellen said she didn't want to overregulate the crypto space, though she's also dismissed Bitcoin at various points during her term and immediately after. When she takes office, she'll oversee a number of proposed regulations through the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, including a controversial rule that would require exchanges to collect and store counterparty information for unhosted wallets. All right, so what we're seeing here is we're seeing terrorism again. Just, it's been 20 years now. Terrorism. Be afraid. Give up all your rights. And yeah, it's just, I mean, I don't know how at this point, after 20 years of the failed war on terror and untold just billions and billions and billions, maybe even trillions of dollars. Yeah, definitely trillions of dollars. Flushed down the toilet to implement racist policies and blow people up all over the world, take away their rights, build a Orwellian nightmare surveillance state with more power than any other. Really, it really is, like, I mean, this giant surveillance state that we're living in is probably one of the most powerful tools for a tyrannical regime that anybody has ever even thought of. I mean, this is, even Orwell couldn't have imagined the level of illegal spying that's going on. And a court recently ruled that Edward Snowden, his leaks about PRISM were basically vindicated, saying that it was in the public's interest to know that, and that this PRISM program and some of the other NSA programs from the Patriot Act were illegal. And we're just, it's been 20 years. We're just ignoring that. We're just going full steam ahead. More and more anti-terrorism propaganda. So, it's sad. I mean, what if we had taken all that money and put it towards like healthcare or education or paying off our debt, infrastructure projects. Who knows? Who knows, really? I mean, it's just absurd that this is still happening and that people still are buying this terrorism scaremongering stuff. And just Glenn Greenwald wrote a great piece about this just a couple days ago, and I highly recommend reading this. I'm just going to read a couple excerpts from it, but he's just talking about, the title is "The New Domestic War on Terror is Coming. No speculation needed. Those who wield power are demanding it. The only question is how much opposition they will encounter." And it's true. I mean, if you're in power, you're always going to try to demand more and 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 more, and you'll take as much as people are willing to give up. We haven't gotten our rights back from the Patriot Act. That was supposed to be temporary. That was at least how it was sold. So I'm just going to read a couple excerpts from this article, and then we're going to go back to focusing on Janet Yellen and some of the hypocrisy there. So first, calls for a war on terror sequel, a domestic version complete with surveillance and censorship, are not confined to ratings-deprived cable hosts and ghouls from the security state. The Wall Street Journal reports that Mr. Biden has said he plans to make a priority of passing a law against domestic terrorism. And he has been urged to create a White House post overseeing the fight against ideologically inspired violent extremists and increasing funding to combat them. Meanwhile, Congressman Adam Schiff, not just one of the most dishonest members of Congress, but also one of the most militaristic and authoritarian, has a bill proposed since 2019 to simply amend the existing Foreign Anti-Terrorism Bill to allow the U.S. government to invoke exactly the same powers at home against domestic terrorists. And if you know anything about the previous years, you'll know that the Obama administration passed in NDAA 2012, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, they put a little piece in there that basically said that the executive branch and the U.S. military has the right to assassinate and disappear and indefinitely detain and torture U.S. citizens without a trial if they're suspected of terrorism, and nobody has to know. And they actually use that power against I forget the name of he was a U.S. citizen who was suspected of terrorism and Muslim terrorism, and they used that power to assassinate him and his 15-year-old son. You can look into that more. I'm sorry I forgot the name of that person, but if you look up NDAA 2012, you'll probably find some stuff about it. So Greenwald goes on. Why would such new terrorism laws be needed in a country that already imprisons more of its citizens than any other country in the world, as the result of a very aggressive set of criminal laws? What acts should be criminalized by new domestic terrorism laws that are not already deemed criminal? They never say, almost certainly because, just as was true for the first set of new war on terror laws, the real aim is to criminalize that which should not be criminalized: speech, association, protests, opposition to the new ruling coalition. The answer to this question, what needs to be criminalized that is not already a crime, scarcely seems to matter. Sadly, that's true. Media and political elites have placed as many Americans as they can, and it is a lot, into full-blown fear and panic mode. And when that happens, people are willing to acquiesce anything claimed necessary to stop that threat, as the first war on terror, still going strong 20 years later, decisively proved. So yeah, again, I recommend reading this article in its entirety and following Glenn Greenwald, one of the great journalists of our era, for sure. And I'll post all these articles I go over in the description. But let's go back to Janet Yellen here. So Janet Yellen is concerned that small transactions, I mean, even $3,000 transactions worth or so can be used to fund domestic terrorism and to hide and to commit money laundering and things like that. Basically, to commit crimes and evade authorities. So here's a little bit about her recently. She made millions in Wall Street from corporate speeches. Yellen and other Biden cabinet nominees reveal earning large amounts in financial disclosures that could complicate their relationships with progressives. This is from Politico. In the past 2 years, President-elect Joe Biden's pick to be Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, has raked in more than $7.2 million in speaking fees from Wall Street and large corporations, including Citi, Goldman Sachs, Google, etc. Yellen's financial disclosure is one of 3 filed by the Biden team at the end of 2020 that could become politically problematic with the left wing of the Democratic Party when confirmation hearings began in January. A Biden transition official said they filed the forms midweek, blah, blah, blah. Yellen, the former chair of the Federal Reserve, brought in nearly $1 million in giving 9 speeches to Citibank alone. She earned more than $800,000 speaking to Citadel, a hedge fund operated by the Republican mega donor Ken Griffin. She also spoke to the law and lobbying firm Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman. And then it goes on to explain some of the other members of Biden's staff who are similarly compromised by big money donors. I mean, these aren't donors; these are off the books. These aren't technically political donations because it would be illegal. So this is like a well-known loophole that's been going on with politicians for a long time, where they get paid hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to go speak at financial institutions and giant corporations and private speeches. It just doesn't make sense for them to get paid that much money to give a speech, first of all. And it also looks a lot like quid pro quo type of straight up bribery that allows, it's just a loophole that allows them to accept bribes from these giant corporations. So the fact that she's got almost $7.3 million in speaking fees from these companies and these interests that she's really supposed to be regulating is pretty concerning. And in my opinion, that needs to be answered before we can trust her to regulate citizens for exchanging cryptocurrency with each other. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say about that. I mean, it is what it is. It's just, this is the way it's been going for a long time. And if in case you need any more, information about why this is a concern, I'm about to go into that with some of the history here. So here's an article from the HuffPost back in 2017. Obama's $400,000 Wall Street speech is completely in character. Ask all the bankers he jailed for fraud. Which are none. The rumors are true. Former President Barack Obama will receive $400,000 to speak at a healthcare conference organized by the Wall Street firm Cantor Fitzgerald. It should not be a surprise. This unseemly and unnecessary cash-in fits a pattern of bad behavior involving the financial sector, one that spans Obama's entire presidency. That governing failure convinced millions of his one-time supporters that the president and his party were not, in fact, playing for the team, helped pave the way for President Donald Trump. Obama's Wall Street payday will confirm for many what they have long suspected, that the Democratic Party is managed by out-of-touch elites who do not understand or care about the concerns of ordinary Americans. It's hard to fault those who came to this conclusion. Obama refused to prosecute the rampant fraud behind the 2008 Wall Street collapse, despite inking multi-billion-dollar settlement after multi-billion-dollar settlement with major firms over misconduct ranging from foreclosure fraud to rigging energy markets to tax evasion. In some cases, big banks even pleaded guilty to felonies, but Obama's Justice Department allowed actual human bankers to ride into the sunset. Early in his presidency, Obama vowed to spend up to $100 billion to help struggling families avert foreclosure. But instead, the administration converted this relief plan into a slush fund for big banks, as top traders at bailed out firms were allowed to collect six-figure bonuses on the taxpayer's dime. Nothing forced Obama to govern this way. Had he truly believed that prosecuting bankers for obvious criminal fraud would cause an economic collapse, Obama would, presumably, have tried to radically reshape the financial sector. He did not. His administration's finance-friendly policies damaged the economic recovery and generated a new cohort of Trump supporters. As Nate Cohn of the New York Times has demonstrated, nearly one-fourth of Obama's white working-class supporters in 2012 flipped for Trump in 2016. Racism and misogyny were part of Trump's appeal, but not all two-time Obama voters turned to Trump out of bigotry alone. So, it goes on, but yeah, I mean, these speeches are, just really out in the open opportunities to garner favor for moneyed interests with politicians. And 400,000 wasn't it, really. I mean, he made 1.2 million from just 3 Wall Street speeches. And then the president's spokesman came out and said that they allowed him to give $2 million to children's charities, and so that justifies it. So being bribed by banks to sell out the American public and move trillions of dollars directly into the same giant banks that fucked over the economy in the first place through fraud is okay as long as you go ahead and give a couple million to your favorite charities. Then that justifies it. We can see here Elizabeth Warren back in 2014. I mean, believe it or not, Elizabeth Warren actually used to stand up for something beyond just sheer partisan politics. Here's an article from 2014. Elizabeth Warren, Citibank owns Obama administration. In one of the most astonishing speeches ever given from the Senate floor, progressive Democrat Senator Elizabeth Warren called out the Obama administration for being a wholly owned subsidiary of Citibank. Her speech was prompted by a Wall Street bomb inserted at the last minute in the omnibus spending package, gutting a key provision from the already watered-down Dodd-Frank Act of 2010. That provision regulated how banks trade in derivatives. The banks wanted to, once again, gamble with FDIC-insured deposits, and if the derivative deal blows up as before, to be bailed out once again by taxpayers. Obama, a master of triangulation, urged that, in the spirit of bipartisanship, members of Congress vote for the bill, which he has since signed. Senator Warren says the deregulation of derivatives was in the bill because Obama and his Citibank friends wanted it there. And here, I mean, it's a great speech by Elizabeth Warren. It's about 10 minutes long. I'm not going to play it here, but I highly recommend checking this out. Again, I will leave this in the description of this video, and then there's also a transcript of her speech here too. So, continuing on with the financial corruption and how it relates to these speeches. Kind of like what do these organizations get in return for paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for a politician to speak behind closed doors? This is from the New Republic. The most important WikiLeaks revelation isn't about Hillary Clinton. What John Podesta's emails from 2008 reveal about the way power works in the Democratic Party. The most important revelation in the WikiLeaks dump of John Podesta's emails has nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. The messages go all the way back to 2008, when Podesta served as co-chair President-elect Barack Obama's transition team. And a month before the election, the key staffing for that future administration was almost entirely in place, revealing that some of the most crucial decisions an administration can make occur well before a vote has been cast. So these emails came out from WikiLeaks, and they showed that Citibank had sent the Obama administration a list of who they wanted in the cabinet. And then after that, the Obama administration basically appointed them to the cabinet exactly as how they wanted. Michael Froman, who is now U.S. Trade Representative, but at the time was an executive at Citigroup. It's not even, I mean, they don't even like pretend to, it's just the revolving door is so out in the open. I mean, anyways, former executive at Citigroup, U.S. Trade Representative, wrote an email to Podesta on October 6, 2008 with the subject lists. Froman used a Citigroup email address. He attached 3 documents. Blah, blah, blah. The lists about who they want to be in the cabinet for senior level positions. The cabinet list ended up being almost entirely on the money. It correctly recommended the people who were then appointed to those positions. Eric Holder for the Justice Department, Jan Napolitano for Homeland Security, former Bush holdover Robert Gates for Defense, Rahm Emanuel for Chief of Staff. Now, Rahm Emanuel is a funny one. I mean, he's kind of a notorious supervillain, but I think he's the person who famously said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste," and he certainly put that into effect as mayor of Chicago. I remember there was a NATO protest in Chicago, and while Rahm Emanuel was he was the mayor, and he first said that he lied and said that we're going to put in all these security cameras and all this Orwellian surveillance in there to ensure that the NATO that the NATO conference goes, that they have the security for it that they need, and that he promised everybody that it was only going to be temporary, and that they're going to take them back down after the NATO meeting. But then afterwards, they left all that security apparatus up, and then he said, "Oops, sorry, I lied before, and we're just going to keep those up and whatever." It's kind of funny. I'll see if I can find an article about that, and put that in the description as well. So yeah, I mean, so Citibank sends an email to the Obama administration. Here's who we want to be in your cabinet. The Obama administration appoints them to the cabinet, and then the Obama administration gives them, I think, how much money did they give to Citibank? Let me see if that's on here. Might be in this article too. This is just another article about the same thing. One moment here. I'm going to see if I can find it, because I know they gave them a stupid amount of money through that Wallstreet bailout. Citigroup's recommendations came just 3 days after then-President George W. Bush signed into law TARP, which allocated $700 billion in taxpayer money to rescue the largest Wall Street banks. The single biggest beneficiary was Citigroup, which was given $45 billion in cash in the form of a government stock purchase, plus a $306 billion government guarantee to back up its worthless mortgage-related assets. Then presidential candidate Obama played a critical role in shepherding the massively unpopular bank bailout through Congress. The September financial crash convinced decisive sections of the U.S. corporate financial elite that the Democratic candidate of Hope and Change would be better positioned to contain popular opposition to the bailout than his Republican rival, Senator John McCain of Arizona. As President Obama not only funneled trillions of dollars to the banks, he saw to it that not a single leading Wall Street executive faced prosecution for the orgy of speculation and swindling that led to the financial collapse in the Great Recession. And he personally intervened to block legislation capping executive pay at bailed out firms. That's just wild. It really is. So to bring it all back, we should be concerned by Janet Yellen's $7.2 million I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and call them potential bribes from these giant banks and giant corporations. And she really doesn't have any leg to stand on when she's talking about how she's concerned about money laundering and illegal activities happening. When we see, I just showed you a quick little demonstration. That's really just tip of the iceberg. This stuff happens all the time, and they allow it. And this is why people are going to cryptocurrency. This is why people are going to cryptocurrency instead of the dollar, because it's much harder for them to just rig the game like this and to bail out Wall Street executives with that money. I mean, in cryptocurrency, all transactions are all transactions are public, and so I mean, I guess they're not all public, but you can at least see where money is moving around. You don't necessarily know who it's going to, and that's what they're trying to introduce here with some of these regulations. But it's just like we are going to cryptocurrency because of this crap constantly, and we're peacefully opting out of this corrupt financial system in favor of one that's decentralized, and that actually where the value of our labor can be held and not inflated anyways too through arbitrary quantitative easing, if you want to call it that. So yeah, I mean, in conclusion, cryptocurrencies are a concern. Yeah, maybe. This is definitely a concern. So yeah, again, thanks for everybody for tuning in, and stay tuned. Please let me know like what you think, and leave a comments on library. Tell your friends about this video if you like it. And yeah, I hope you all have a blessed day. Take care. Until next time. Bye-bye.